All right, everybody, Terrence Popp here with another episode of Live from the Lair. And today I'm going to be covering a subject. I received a couple of emails recently and quite a few more in the past. And I think it's time I address the underlying premise of everything that were in those emails. Now, they're from active duty service members. Some of the original ones might be off active duty now because it was 3 or 4 years ago. I know a lot of guys who watch, my channel who are still in all of the branches of the military, including, people who are in foreign country militaries. It is what it is.
Do you like stories about serial killers? What about psychics? How about a psychic serial killer with a conscience wiping out the filth of society?
Yeah!
If you thought Dexter was a great show that went soft in its final seasons, these are the books for you. Introducing The Jericho Files, written by an old infantry grunt who has seen evil firsthand, and digested it into grade A gore porn with 5-star reviews all around. Click on the link tree in the Meat Gazer box and buy your copies today on Amazon, you filthy, dirty riggers.
For those of you that don't know, I'm a retired first sergeant. I did 33 years in the system, 21 active, the rest Guard Reserve. I served through 3 wars and I was almost killed in 2. And throughout my career, I noticed a constant when it came to the upper leadership at first in the officer corps, and then as my career progressed, I saw it happening in the NCO corps. What that is, it's toxic leadership. All right, now, what do I mean when I say toxic leadership? I mean leaders who don't give a shit about you at all. Literally treat you as a stepping stone to further their career.
You are nothing but unorganized, grabastic pieces of amphibian shit.
And some of these toxic leaders, to make themselves look good, literally tear down the people around them. All right, that is actually the worst. I have seen leaders who, basically shit the bed, wipe their ass with the sheets on their way out, and still get promoted up the ladder.
This is bullshit.
I'm talking officers who lost $20,000, $30,000 worth of equipment. I had some of the soldiers under their command get wounded or injured needlessly. Stuff like that. I've even come across generals who've had to do the same thing. Who have done the same thing. All right, now how I dealt with toxic situations. All right, so we're going to go back. And this is a story in regards to when I was in Iraq in 2004. Now, I was in the doghouse because I refused to falsify RTEPs and training records while in mobilization to get our unit moved directly into Iraq. One, I'm not a good liar. 2, I have integrity. And number 3, if I were to do such a thing and that guy was to go down range and get zeroed out, my conscience would kill me, and I just couldn't do it. All right, so the next day they call me in, tell me I'm a shitbag, and I'm not doing my job, blah, 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 and they relieve me. Fine, the commander, it's his prerogative to do whatever he wants. Now, I was a master sergeant. All right, now, for those of you that don't know, a master sergeant in the Army who's triple tabbed, meaning airborne tab, ranger tab, special forces tab. When you show up, you automatically get basically a king's ransom in respect, and I dare say admiration. And the flip side of that is you wind up with a lot of people who hate your guts because you are doing something they can't even dream of. That's a side note. All right, so I get moved over to by my commander and first sergeant who just wanted to humiliate me. They put me in charge of setting up a AFIS PX at Abu Ghraib prison. Now, during this time, it was literally right after the whole torture story broke out that happened there. And we were getting mortared and rocketed usually between 2 to 5 times a day, and sometimes 1 or 2 times at night. It was pretty crazy. All right, we had people getting ambushed and shot up, tore up, traveling between Abu and Victory. We had a couple brigade commanders get whacked by ambushes and IEDs, and they literally had to keep Bradleys positioned every 400 meters on certain parts of the highway just to limit attacks. So I'm going down to the AFI's yard on Victory every morning. I had my driver who I handpicked for me. His name is Jones, great dude. And I had another guy named Ritter, I'm not going to use his first name, who basically had a brain housing disconnect, and he was in the doghouse with me. And I went to great lengths to rehabilitate him to the point he actually retired out of the military and did a pretty good job. All right, so I go down to the AFI's yard, and they opened at I think 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. So I get to Victory right around 6 o'clock in the morning. And listen, I am never going to turn away a omelet breakfast, especially when it's cooked in the General's Chow Hall. So I made it a point to get me and my boys there, and every morning we ate like a king.
Breakfast.
That was one of the positives. All right, and I've always had a really good way of turning shitty situations into a comedy fest, because that's the way you beat back insanity. But on a couple of these, I had to go and get fuel. And the way it works is you take your vehicle, drive it down to the fuel point, and this is there was 3 fuel points on Victory at the time. And, they take your name, the last 4 of your SOCH, the bumper number of the vehicle, the unit you're assigned to, and they top you off. And then you when you're done, you sign for it. So I go there, and it is a absolute shit show. They have guys standing out there by the fuel truck and the fuel blivets and other, areas that had other supplies. Not a lick of overhead cover. And they were getting savagely mortared all the time with the 60-millimeter mortars, and they were firing RPGs over the wall. I go and I talk to their NCOIC, who was an E6, because all of the other NCOs were wounded and medevaced out. And I asked some questions. Now, this is an Army Reserve supply unit. They are not active duty. And they literally took 55% casualties over the 4 or 5 months that they were there. All right, now I am fully versed in military doctrine, especially from the United States point of view. And any unit who loses 50% or more of its personnel is combat ineffective.
Not good.
All right. There are frontline infantry units that don't take anywhere near that kind of casualties. And I talk to these people. They're like, you can see it in their face. They're like on the verge of breaking. And I'm like, oh shit, and I just can't. I'm just not that guy to be like, well, that sucks for you. No. I mean, this is people's lives here. So I took down all the information. I took down the officers, the OIC, all the way up to the chain. I got some of the reports, because every time somebody gets wounded, you got to fill out the report and put them in for Purple Heart, blah, blah, blah. All right. I had 5 or 6 of those, and I drove to the office of the theater commander. Of course, he's never there. I talked to a full bird that was, basically riding shotgun for him. I don't remember the guy's name. And I'm like, sir, are you aware that you have a unit here on Victory that is now combat ineffective because of all the casualties they have taken? And he looks at me like I'm speaking Latin. And I'm like, it's okay, sir. You don't have to worry about it. Here's all the information. And just so you know, all of this is going to the DODIG, and I'm sending it to the senator of the NCOIC on the ground who's managing that shit show. And you guys can just all work it out. It is absolutely bullshit. Well, I didn't have to. I went back to Victory like 3 or 4 days later. Again, had to get fuel. I go back to the fuel point with where the other military supplies are, and lo and behold, there are now bunkers next to, the fuel truck, and there's sandbags around the fuel blivets. All right, and there's actual bunkers put in place so people can go in there when they're getting hammered. And here's the best part. They were taking casualties in the main building because mortars were coming through the roof, detonating inside, and just utter pandemonium. So I go in there, and there's 8-foot tall sandbags, dividing up all kinds of little sections. So if something does come through the roof, it only hits in that room and decimates the room. It doesn't wound people or destroy all kinds of crazy shit. All right, so that's one way I dealt with the toxic leadership, and I believe that toxic leadership was simply because, we have a whole crop of incompetent, mediocre officers who are running the show, and quite frankly, they surround themselves with yes men, and they never hear the ugly truths. All right, so one of the best ways to deal with the toxic leader is speak the truth, know the regulations, and be willing to put it on paper if need be. All right, now, you guys have been watching the show for a while. I had a battalion commander. I'm not going to say her whole name. Let's just say we call her Dina.
She's a cunt.
And at the time, she was a newly minted lieutenant colonel. Now, I had been on the AGR program about 3 years, 2.5 years. And for whatever reason, she calls me in and tells me that she's worried about me because I'm not performing to the standard I should be performing at. Despite the fact that I passed Intel Analyst School, got reclassed in, civil affairs. I took, I was the NCOIC of 2 missions to NTC and 1 to JRTC at that time. Okay. And I was literally the acting first sergeant for 3 companies and technically the acting commander for 1. So I'm literally wearing 8 hats doing my job. And when and what saved my ass when I finally took this up the chain is when you pull up the companies by their UIC, which is Unit Identification Code. You can see the medical readiness, the weapons qual, the height and weights, all of that. And for all 3 of the companies I was managing, we were 9th, 11th, and 14th in all of KPOC. All right. And somehow this toxic leader said I wasn't meeting the standard. Okay. Now, I did not have a black belt in administrative violence at this time. I had maybe a 2nd-degree brown belt. But the only good thing that came out from this whole situation was I acquired my black belt in administrative violence. And I literally started filing IG complaint after IG complaint of all of the craziness this woman was doing. She was flagging people or saying they were not in good standing with the unit, and there was no flagging actions on record. There were 3 guys who were transferred. They weren't transferred. They were original members of the 414 when the unit was transferred to Detroit. That's 500 miles away. In the Army Reserve, if you're going to take a posting more than 50 miles away from your house, you got to fill out a distance waiver. None of that was done for these 3 Joes. And I didn't know this at the time, but 2 of them she discharged with less than honorables. And she was trying to do it to a third guy. His name was Calabrese. He's a great dude. I had to call an old buddy of mine who used to be a UA for the 414 in New York and hand it off to him. And he told me how he basically ripped them all apart and got them off the hook. In fact, got them retired, medically retired, and a disability check while at it. Sometimes you're just going to have to put pen to paper when you have a really bad toxic leader. And here's another thing. All it takes is 20% of a unit to raise their hand and go, we have no confidence in this chain of command. And they're gone. They're gone.
Don't let the door hit you where God split you.
And you could do that with these trans commanders. I have a half a dozen guys send me emails complaining about just how out of the fucking mind these trans commanders are, or trans NCOs who don't have to pass PT and don't have to make height and weight. All right, the Army used to work on merit, meaning if you want to get promoted, you need to work your ass off for it. You need to be the best dude for the job. And then you got the job. I can respect that, and most other dudes can. I've talked to lots of guys who got passed over for E5 because they missed the cutoff by 5 or 6 points because they fired, marksman or sharpshooter instead of expert on their weapons qual. It happens. But I've seen other guys get passed over for subpar women and minorities who had no business doing the job. And you can see it in their performance when you look at their PT cards and what have you. Listen, when I used to run promotion boards, if you showed up to my promotion board with, a 65 average on your PT test, I did not recommend you for promotion.
Denied.
And you want to know why? Because you're a 65% leader. What are you going to do? Shoot 13 out of 20 guys that are attacking your position? Shut up. I need to see maximum output before you get my recommendation. I never played that affirmative action shit or the minority crap. Right? Now, I'm not saying that I didn't go to bat for some minority NCOs that got passed over, because I did, because in my book it was 100% wrong. It was wronger than two boys fucking in church. All right, one guy, I got him a stab board, which is basically they hold a separate board, and got him promoted to E6. And I had another guy who I watched for an entire year try to fix his 2-1 up at the DOD level and got passed over that year and the second year. And I literally, this guy he sat at 8 feet away from me, and I listened to him virtually every day trying to fix his 2-1. So finally, they tell him he's passed over again. He storms out, because he's pissed. I got it. And this is about 11:30 in the afternoon or in the morning. Since I've been keeping notes, I wrote up a statement, filled out a DOD 1559 IG complaint, scanned it into PDF, sent that to the Sergeant Major of the Army, who promptly called me, which, as an NCO, that's what you do. All right. If you're going to drop an IG complaint, just for professional courtesy, if you let them know that, you're planning on doing this. And I do that basically to kick over, the can of worms. And the Sergeant Major of the Army is like, tell me what's up. And I told him over the phone. I wrote up another email statement. All right. Now, I had finished this by roughly 12:15 in the afternoon. Fired it up the chain. All right. Now, this NCO comes back around 2 o'clock, sits down at his chair, boots up his computer, pulls up his email, and lo and behold, they fixed his 2-1, and he's getting promoted to E7. What I'm trying to tell you, gentlemen, toxic leaders exist because everyone around them is goddamn silent. Stop being silent. Because at the end of the day, if the flag goes up, these toxic leaders are going to make life and death decisions over you. That is unacceptable, and you better take it serious, because I'm sick and tired of burying you guys over stupid shit. All right. Sorry I had to go on with a rant about toxic leaders, but that's what you're going to have to do. Plain and simple.